General Sir Henry Rawlinson, British commander at the Somme in 1916, had learnt from the past. He embraced new ideas, the close combination of men and machinery, the importance of achievable goals.
My only difficulty will be to get enough divisions and to keep the thing secret.
Rawlinson aimed his assault at a weak 12-mile sector of the German line, east of Amiens. He had the French in support to the south. General Erich Ludendorff, Joint Commander-in-Chief of the German Army, neither knew of an attack nor feared one.
We should wish for nothing better than to see the enemy launch an offensive.
100,000 infantry are standing grimly, silently. All feel to make sure their bayonets are firmly locked. The section officer counts the last seconds.
The speed was terrific. Within a few moments of the Huns running from our tanks and infantry, our guns were coming up into new forward positions. It was glorious to be in the rush of an advance.
The Allied attack sent the Germans reeling. By nightfall, Rawlinson's Fourth Army had advanced 8 miles. They killed and seriously wounded 9,000 Germans and captured 18,000 more. Ludendorff declared the 8th of August the Black Day of the German army. General Paul von Hindenburg steadied him, but both knew the Battle of Amiens was the beginning of the end. Mighty as Germany looked on the map, her armies on the Western Front were near the end of their tether. Exhausted, hungry, fed up. Their generals had given them neither clear aims nor adequate supplies. The Germans had lost nearly 1 million men since March. Ludendorff blamed the home front for spreading defeatism.
I was told of behavior which I openly confess I should not have thought possible in the German army. Whole bodies of our men had surrendered to single soldiers.
Germany's problems went beyond poor morale. She'd lost a string of vital battles. The battle of the factories and technology. Germany had built just 20 tanks. The Allies, over 4,000. She'd lost the battle of manpower. 250,000 Americans were pouring into France every month. She'd lost the battle of command. The Allies worked together under the leadership of Marshal Ferdinand Foch. But Ludendorff's generals despaired of his lack of strategic plan, and some feared for his mental health.
Great crisis this morning, very nerve-wracking. Ludendorff is a bundle of nerves. It's never his fault. He looks everywhere for scapegoats.
After Amiens, Foch orchestrated a series of attacks up and down the German lines. First French, then British, now American. The Germans fell back under the rain of blows. While the Allies were pulling together, the Central Powers were tearing apart. In Austria-Hungary, 1/3 of 1 million soldiers had deserted. The people at home were starving. The multi-ethnic empire was splintering. Its Poles, Czechs and Bosnians saw defeat as their chance to pursue independence. In mid-September, the Austrian Emperor Karl told the Kaiser he wanted to negotiate with the Allies. The Kaiser begged him not to.
I cannot refrain from expressing to you my astonishment and sorrow that you could even think of doing this. You must know how destructive this course of action is.
But Karl had already sent his proposal for talks to the Allies, and they just threw it back in his face. Another great empire allied to Germany was dying. The 600-year-old Ottoman Empire was a spent force. Britain was driving the Turks out of Mesopotamia, Palestine and Syria. They were now fighting for their lives, not for Germany. Then the third link in Germany's alliance chain started to give way. Germany needed Bulgaria to hold the Balkan front. But by September 1918, a huge Allied force had gathered in Macedonia. If the Bulgarians folded, the Allies' way would be clear to Austria-Hungary. The Bulgarians who dug into these trenches, their morale cracking. Crown Prince Boris was almost attacked by his own soldiers when he visited the front.
We are naked, barefoot, and hungry.
An empty knapsack does not guard a frontier.
The First World War had begun in the Balkans, with Serbia as the tinderbox. Now, as part of the Allied force, she was in at the kill. And for the Serbs, it was personal. In 1915, the Bulgarians had helped kick them out of their homeland. Here was the Serbs' chance for revenge.
The heavy artillery made the Bulgarians crawl deep into their shelters. All the excitement made my hair stand on end. My blood was up.
The Allies smashed through the Bulgarian lines and rolled north. On the 28th of September, Bulgaria sued for peace. When he heard this, Ludendorff suffered a fit, collapsing to the floor, foaming at the mouth. The very next day, he learned the Allies had breached the Hindenburg Line along the Saint-Quentin Canal, Germany's last fixed line of defense on the Western Front. Two days later, on the 1st of October, Ludendorff summoned his senior staff to his headquarters in Spa. Among them, Colonel Albrecht von Thaer.
Ludendorff stood up. His face was pale and full of deep worry. He said it was his duty to tell us that our military condition was terribly serious.
Bulgaria has already been lost. Austria and Turkey are both at the end of their strength. Any day now, our Western Front could be breached. Therefore, the Supreme Army Command demands that a proposal for bringing about peace be made without delay.
Ludendorff's stark decision to ask for an armistice, or ceasefire, was a terrible shock. Generals quietly sobbed. When Ludendorff left the room, Thaer followed him.
I grabbed his right arm with both hands and said, "Your Excellency, can it be true? Is that the last word? Am I awake or dreaming?" I was completely beside myself. He remained calm and gentle and said to me with a deeply sorrowful smile, "Unfortunately, that is how it is, and I see no other way out."
To the German people in October 1918, the prospect of an armistice seemed heaven-sent.
A great sigh of relief escapes from the lips of the tormented nation. This means peace you can hear at every corner of the streets. And peace smiles in the eyes of every little shopgirl in the baker's or grocer's.
Germany's soldiers had kept her politicians in the dark about the string of military disasters. So the news that they wanted an armistice came as a bolt from the blue.
The deputies were absolutely broken. Ebert turned white as a sheet and didn't utter a single word. Stresemann looked as if he'd had an accident. Secretary Waldo is believed to have left the room saying, "The only thing left to do is to shoot oneself in the head."
But peace talks were still a way off. First, the terms of the ceasefire would have to be settled. Germany approached US President Woodrow Wilson, asking him to broker the armistice with the Allies. They chose him because he'd already proposed a peace plan, the 14 points. French Prime Minister Clemenceau was unimpressed.
14 points? The good Lord has only 10.
Wilson's points were an idealistic package of liberal principles, including rights to national self-determination and a League of Nations to watch over it all. Germany believed Wilson would secure a fair deal for them on this basis.
We are ready to be just to the German people, to deal fairly with the German power as with all others. To propose anything but justice to Germany would be to renounce and dishonor our own cause.
But Wilson also insisted Germany had to admit defeat and democratize. And Britain and France didn't want to talk about a new world order until the war was over. While the politicians argued, the fighting raged on. Germany's U-boats continued to sink Allied ships in the Atlantic. And as her armies retreated across France, they looted and laid waste. "14-year-old Yves Congar had kept a diary throughout the German occupation of his hometown of Sedan. He longed for freedom, but dreaded the price the French would have to pay for it.
So here it is, the great moment we spent the last 4 years waiting, hoping, begging for, and yet it brings with it the horror of bombing, gas, fire, perhaps death. We may never see our friends again. Many might be killed, the entire town destroyed. Our one great hope is an armistice."
The First World War did not go quietly. The final months were more lethal than the trench war of past years had been. Men now had to leave the safety of trenches and cross open ground with little place to hide from sweeping machine gun and shell fire. British casualties in autumn 1918 were higher than those exactly a year before, during the terrible Battle of Passchendaele, the epitome of trench slaughter. And the closer to peace, the harder it was to bear the losses.
It was a slaughterhouse, just a mass of mangled flesh and blood. Bob's head was hanging off. You couldn't tell which was Harris and which was Kempton. What was left of him was in pieces. We knew the enemy was beaten. After 3 years in France and the end so near, Bob killed.